In the previous lessons, we established a connection in both directions between our component state and our email input. So whenever the state changes, we update the input by connecting its value attribute to a specific state property. And whenever the user types a character, we trigger an onChange event that updates the component state. So in summary, the state updates the view, and the view updates the state. So we have what we call a two-directional or bidirectional data flow, or data binding, because it flows in both directions between the state and the view. The two are always connected and they never get out of sync. So in this lesson, I want to review these concepts by practicing them on the password and confirm password inputs. So we'll need to add new properties to our component state to hold the user's entry, and then we'll need to connect those state properties to the value attributes on the respective inputs. And then finally, we'll need to register the onChange method handlers, the event handlers, that are going to run when the user types a character. So mostly a refresher in this lesson. I do want to remind you that our confirm password field right here is only present when the form is in registration mode. It does not appear when we are in login mode. And that, of course, is due to this conditional logic right here. That's totally not a problem. We are still welcome to apply whatever attributes we want to this input right here. It doesn't prevent anything from happening. We're still going to have the same flow of having state that is connected to this input that updates in sync with the state. So let's begin. I'm going to scroll up, and at the very top of our app class or our app component, we have our state definition. I'm going to add two more properties to our component state. The first one is going to be password to store the password entry, and I'm going to initialize that to be an empty string. And the second one is going to be confirm password, and that is going to store the entry for the confirm password input. All right, so what's next? The next thing I want to do is I want to connect those state properties to value attributes on respective inputs. So right here in the render method, I'm going to destructure those two new state properties. So right here, I'm going to add password, and I'm also going to add confirm password. There we go. And now we need to connect those to their respective inputs. So scrolling down, here is our first input that connects to our email state property. Down below, we have the input for the password. So right here, I'm going to add the value attribute and set that equal to password. So whatever the password state is equal to is what this input is going to be equal to. Once again, currently we do not have an onChange handler, so this becomes a read-only input. We're only going to be able to show what is in the password piece of state, and there's no way to update that. There is no way to react to the user trying to change this input by typing a character. So right now, we've basically prohibited this input from being capable of being worked with. But don't worry, we're going to add that onChange handler in just a moment. I'm going to scroll down, and here again we have our second password input, the confirm password input, and right here I'm going to add value, and I'm going to set that to our confirm password piece of state. So I just can show you right now in the browser that if I go to my components section and click on app, you'll notice we have those two new pieces of state, and whenever I update state, that will adjust the input value. So for example, if I go into password here and do test, and go into confirm password here and do test, you'll notice that we are updating the respective inputs. And that's because the changing of those pieces of state forces the render method to rerun again, and React says, okay, the value of this input should be whatever is the value of that piece of state, in this case password, which is test. So React updates the current value of the input, right? So state is now updating the value of the input, but not the reverse. And we want to enable that. We want to enable the user to interact with the input and adjust the state. So in order to do that, we're going to need to add the onChange event handler. We're going to react to a change event. So right here, I'm going to write onChange. And as we know, we can provide either an arrow function in line or connect this to some kind of component method. So I'm going to define a method here, and I'm going to call it handle password change. The name is totally up to us, but we're obviously referencing it on this keyword because it's going to exist as an instance method on this instance of this app component class, on this component, in other words. So I'm going to scroll up, and right here where we have handle email change, a few lines below, I'm going to define my new one, handle password change. As always, we're going to make this an arrow function in line, so that is going to avoid the issues with the binding of the this keyword. So we now know that this is correctly going to be the component, and that is going to have a setState method that we inherit from the React Component superclass. And here, of course, we're going to need to update the password property this time around. And where we're going to get the value is once again going to come from the event object that React will generate and pass to this handler method when the user triggers the event. So right here, we're going to have access to the event object. And on that event, we're going to have a target property. And on that object, we're going to have a value property that is going to give me the current entry in that field. And so we're going to take that string and save it to the password state property. The component will re-render. And because the value attribute on this input right here is set to password, it's going to then have whatever the user attempted to type. It's going to occur instantaneously, but behind the scenes, it is going to state first, and then state is forcing the re-render and actually writing that value then to the input. To the user, it looks like they've typed the character, but in the React ecosystem, it's actually going through state first before it comes back down into the input and becomes the value attribute from the state, right? So same rules are going to apply for this input down below here. So I'm going to add an onChange event, and I'm going to tell it what to do by providing a function or a method. I'm going to have a new method here called handle confirm password change. And the same rules are going to apply. React is going to pass whatever method we write here an event object with information about the event. And we have to, of course, define that method to make this functional. So right here, handle confirm password change. I'm going to use the equal sign and assign an arrow function. The method is going to take an event object. And in here, we're once again going to update component state by calling setState. That is the only way that you should update component state after the initialization, after the original assignment of values. And the only thing that's going to change this time around is the state property that we care about. This time around, we care about the confirm password state property. And of course, we're once again going to get its new value from the event object, the target object, and then the value property on that object. So now we have 3 pieces of state for 3 separate input fields. For every input field, we've wired up its own handler method that will update the appropriate property on state. And then for each input field, we've also connected it using the value attribute to that state property so that whenever the state property changes, the input will reflect that value on screen for the user. So now we have bidirectional data between the state and the view. When the state updates, the view updates. When the view updates, the state updates. So I can show you this right here. I can type in something like hello, type a password like test, type a password like test here as well, open up my React developer tools, and click into the app component, and you'll see that those user entries are now present in the React component state. Conversely, if I go into here and change this to something else like Barney, and maybe hello here and goodbye here, even though we can't see the actual characters, we can see by the length that it is indeed the new string that we typed here. So as soon as we make those entries to the state, we can see that that forces a component re-render, which updates the value attribute right here, and those changes are now reflected on our form. So the beautiful part about this is when the user finally submits the form, right, we have all of their important pieces of information already gathered in the state. We do not have to worry about reaching into the input, manually finding that input element on the screen and trying to extract a value. We have the state synced up or coordinated with, right, in sync with what the user has typed so far. So when we're ready to submit the form, we have all the data we need. We just need to talk to state, get those strings or values or whatever the user has given us, and just submit it upon form submission. All right, so that's the beautiful part about storing all this information within React. React is in full control. Okay, that's all there is to cover in this lesson, so I will see you in the next one.